Welcome to the Heart-Led Business Show, where compassion meets commerce and leaders lead with love. Join your host, Tom Jacobs, as he delves into the insightful conversations with visionary business leaders who defy the status quo, putting humanity first and profit second. From heartfelt strategies to inspiring stories, this podcast is your compass in the world of conscious capitalism. So buckle up and let your heart guide your business journey.
And yes, we're diving deep into the depths of owning a heart-led business, tackling tangles and triumph with a twinkle in our eye. So sit back, folks, as we dish and discuss. Kathleen, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. What a marvelous introduction.
Awesome. Well, I'm really excited
Oh
to
my goodness.
dive into your expertise because I think I might be one of your demographics as I was looking through your bio. But before we go into that, tell us, what's your definition of a heart-led business?
Okay, beautiful. Well, without going super deep, my definition is so you have different levels of awareness, right, that are correlated to different levels of energy. Some people start companies early to meet survival-based needs, right? So that's a very kind of low level of awareness. And other people found companies, found businesses from the space of the heart, which is much higher. If you look at the energy centers of the body, it's much higher, right? The heart is above the stomach, which is above, even all the way down to that lower survival center. So my definition of a heart-founded company is creating a company from the inspiration of your soul's purpose on the planet, right? Your soul's purpose, which is always to make the place a better, leave the place better than you found it, right? Before you depart. So that's my definition. And yeah, so when that idea, that hair-raising vision and idea of the company springs forth from the heart, activating every cell in your body, that's when you know you found it, and that's when you know it's a heart-centered company because it benefits human beings' lives, and the wealth is a gift from the divine for benefiting the whole, right? So that's my definition.
That's cool. I mean, and one thing that I pulled out of there just that really kind of resonated with me was inspiration from your soul's purpose. Could you dive into that a little bit more? Because that was really interesting for me.
Purpose. Okay, so, I'm operating on the premise that we're not material beings, we're spiritual beings, right? So the purpose being, gosh, I could go so deep into that. 2 tiers so that I don't go all over the place. First tier, the purpose, the soul purpose, the greater purpose, which you can discover in deep meditation. There are ways for discovering that. But the soul purpose it's a divine design. It's a design that only you can bring to fruition, right? You came here. This is my belief, right? You came here to create a footprint in humanity. So that's the purpose that I feel like I'm following. Now, it's of utmost importance that you create a company around your heart purpose. Soul purpose is wonderful. That's even greater. But, having it really connected to the heart, because you will absolutely want to give up. Many times you will want to give up. But if this is inspired from the heart, you won't give up. You'll never give up, ever.
Yeah. I mean, that's, thinking about some of those part-time jobs that we've all had, as youngsters, they were definitely not sole purpose. I worked at McDonald's. That was my first job. And it was so easy to quit because there was just go in, clock in, grab your measly paycheck and clock out. So I can totally see like that difference from when you're following something that just really embodies you and lights you up. Like you said, you get those goosebumps, you can feel that you're alive and it feels great.
And yet, all those jobs I had, right? Cleaning the bathroom at the coffee shop, mopping the floor at the coffee shop, making the lattes. I was always a barista, doing this and that. And yet all of that work prepared me in many ways, because there's a lesson to everything. It prepared me in many ways to get along in the physical world, right? And that's a huge part of running a company. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, I was going to kind of ask, why is it then that there's a huge portion of the population that isn't doing their sole purpose, isn't kind of having that heart-led, whether you're an employee or as an entrepreneur, they aren't lit up by it. So what do you think is the difference between the people that are following their purpose, making a business out of it, and those that don't?
I know. Let me pause for 1 second so I can give you a heart-centered response. Well, maybe it's rare for a reason. I don't know, but I can only speak to, how I perceive this and the societal influences and the cultural influences. You're molded and maybe it's supposed to be this way because it is not easy to take this path of, chasing that purpose. It's not easy at all. It takes an immense amount of courage and more faith than anyone could possibly ever believe measure, right? So it takes a lot. And, we sort of come here to this planet. We're molded to stay confined. We're molded to follow that path, right? What is it? Get a job when you're 16, drive, go to college, finish college, I don't know, become an engineer or, whatever people do. I went into finance and economics. I was going to be a financial analyst but and I believe this is a spiritual test, there's kind of this mediocrity. It's a very potent, this mediocrity that sets in. And a lot of great, masters and spiritual teachers have said, yeah, that's the great test of the ego, to put you in this sort of lull of mediocrity where nothing's too great, but nothing's too bad, and just stay in that. It's the comfort zone. Stay in there. There's some suffering, but you get some, positive doses of dopamine here and there, and you just kind of stay there. And so the lull of the paycheck and the reliability, it's extremely enticing. So you stay in this space of mediocrity, and it's mediocrity because you're kind of unhappy, but you also have some moments of happiness, right? So you stay in that zone, and it's just a lot easier. And I don't fault anyone because I was there too. It's a lot easier. But when you have that moment of like, wow, this is what it feels like to be so alive and pursuing my purpose, and you step out and you start to express that courage and you have faith, then you do get to a point where there's no turning back. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's more of an opinion. Anything else, right? I just want where you feel about that, because you do work with a lot of people on purpose. So why don't we talk a little bit about your business, what you do, and what inspired you to start?
I was in and out of hospitals, operating rooms throughout my whole childhood. And that created a lot of trauma in the nervous system. That came out when I was in my early 20s. I had a lot of, chronic anxiety, panic disorder, etc. So then I came upon neuroplasticity as a concept, right? Positive neuroplasticity to heal the nervous system. I mean, it was powerful. It was life-changing. I was doing a lot of meditation, healing through, higher energy. Then I could no longer do, be in the finance path. Essentially, it was just, gosh, when that love hits you, you can't, that inspiration, right? That divine love and that inspiration, you can't keep going on in that old way. So I started a company and I began studying the science of neuroplasticity, the science around happiness, the biology of happiness, the biology of God, right? The biology of the divine, and created a method that I teach now. Of course, it's evolved over the years, but this is probably 8 years ago, and created a method I call pre-sensing, and it rewires chronic stress in the nervous system. And then here's the focal point. I knew I wasn't quite doing that purpose, right? I was just kind of working with anybody. So I started doing Artist Way morning pages, which is very powerful. And after a couple weeks, one morning I was writing, the prompt is, what am I supposed to do? And then it hit me, people talk about those downloads. It just hit me, and every molecule of my being, everything just came alive. And the voice was very clear. The realization, the inspiration was very clear, was, you are here to contribute to the healing of the hearts of men, right? You are here to heal the hearts of men through your work, and more specifically expanding out to work with men in government and policy, making those greater decisions, that they be connected to their heart. And so that's where I've been.
Wow. All jokes aside, but that sounds like an upward battle working with governmental employees getting to their heart. But we digress a little bit. Could you define neuroplasticity for the listeners and for me?
Yeah, it is simply through your intention and through your emotion, your ability to create new neural pathways in the brain first, new neural pathways in the brain to support a emotional and thinking experience. So imagining, the pathway in the woods or ski trail, what have you. Let's suppose we'll call that a pathway of peace. If you're someone who's not familiar with the pathway of peace, you're a lot more familiar with, pathway of, I don't know, rumination, stress in general. You would change your thoughts and emotions to over and over. It takes about 8 weeks every day to carve out that new pathway of peace. And after about that 6 to 8 week period, it becomes ingrained in the subconscious, and the subconscious is the body, right? The same way you learn to drive. Now you don't even think about it. You just do it. It's the same for peace. Yeah.
So it's that conscious competence, right? Or unconscious competence, right? You get to that higher level where when you're first learning to drive, it's like, okay, left foot does this, right foot does this, hand does this. Right?
God
Like there'd be
forbid
so
you're
many
doing a stick shift.
Exactly. Well, that was what I was trying to demonstrate. That
I
was
could tell. I was like, oh God, the old days.
Oh, I know. My brother actually taught me how to drive before my dad did, and actually he got in trouble for doing that. But he lives in California, and they had an earthquake, and he called me up. And he was like, Tom, we had this earthquake, but I was dreaming that I was teaching you how to drive while the earthquake was happening, because it was moving around, because I couldn't get the clutch and all that. It's kind of a funny aside.
Clearly the memory in his body.
That's right.
Oh, that's
He
funny.
didn't have to erase that one. Well, cool. So the mind can really kind of heal itself, but it takes our consciousness to be able to do that. Is that what you're saying? Cool.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So
Your frontal lobe, your intention.
awesome. And so 8 years ago is when you started the business, and all rainbows and butterflies since you started, or has there been some ups and downs with having a heart-led business?
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, many ups and downs. So it's kind of interesting. Okay, so I'll go into it. My brain is looking at a timeline right now. For most of that timeline, I would say maybe 5 or 6 years, I saw there way more downs than ups, right? You probably know this.
The first 5 years,
Yeah,
for sure.
it's paramount that you reestablish your relationship to the quote downs, right? And so for a long time, it was difficult. It was work. It was hard. It was a lot of work and a little bit of, I don't know, icing. And when that sweet reward would come, it was, oh God, it was amazing. I would hit a revenue target, higher than I anticipated, or I'd come close to that 10K month, or, I'd be closing tons of clients really quickly in a short period of time. And it would be that feast period. And that would be just enough to like get me through the famine, right? The long periods. But I have had this incredible mentor. And if your listeners can find an amazing mentor, a business coach, someone who really authentically jives for you, this is extremely helpful. I've worked with this gentleman since the beginning of the company. Actually, no, we met a few years in. Yeah, we met a few years in. And he just taught me all the time, you've got to change your relationship to, quote, failure. In fact, his name, he calls himself the fail coach. And it took me a long time, but now everything is fun. I don't do anything that doesn't come from the energy of fun. Now, I had to rewire my brain and my nervous system. I had to change the energy I was working from. None of this is work. Look, you and I are hanging out here. We're having a great conversation. I'm having a beautiful day. This is my quote work, right?
Right.
And so everything comes from the energy of fun, and that is very important. And so if you have to slow the pace down a bit and balance your life more so that you're not in overdrive, which I spent many years in overdrive, and so that's what I would say. So now, oh yeah, there are great successes. There are always challenges. And it's wonderful because on the other side of every challenge is a new version of yourself. It's a greater version of yourself. Overcome the challenge. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else.
Yeah, the rewiring or reframing of especially failures. I tell my employees all the time is like, it's okay to make a mistake as long as we learn from it. And we have to look at, as the more failures we have, the more we have. As long as we don't keep repeating the same failure over and over again, then we're going to be really doing well, because it also is a testament to people trying things and not being afraid to fail. Because I think that keeps people from doing a lot of things, is that fear of failing, that wiring that, oh, if I fail, it's going to be bad, versus like now the way I think about it is like, well, let's try it. If it fails, like, not like we're going to be eaten by a tiger or anything anymore. I mean, it's business. Yeah, you might lose some money, but you can still make it back.
Yeah, let's have fun. Let's see what happens,
Yeah.
and
I
yeah,
love that. I love that
absolutely.
philosophy. That's really great. Don't do anything that doesn't come from fun. That is absolutely a great mantra to
Yeah.
have for people.
And it's like I have had conversations with incredibly successful people, millionaires, even higher. And
Mm,
they say, oh no, my philosophy is fun. I'm not
mm.
doing it if I'm not having fun. And yeah, so, I know the mind is going to come up with a million reasons as to why you can't have fun. It's great at that. But
Mhm.
you've got to interrupt it and rewire those pathways, so.
So coming out of finance, it would seem that like you'd be really great with the numbers and very like, was it right brain, left brain, or just very process and heart centered. So when it came to like the finances of your heart led business, what did you have to do to kind of be okay with making money and still living your purpose?
That's a great question. Side note, a really prolific author in this area of making lots of money and having positive impact is Frederick Dodson. He's been amazing for me. I've done some work with him around this. Again, changing the belief systems, because there's that belief, right, that if you're heart led, you should be poor or whatever. Is that, yeah. So the process of healing that belief system is okay. So that's a greater explanation. I look at it this way, right? We've all tested out selling products for a really cheap price, giving them away for free. So what kind of people did we attract when we did that, right? I think we've all arrived at this realization at one point or another, right? Either, right? So when I did that, I attracted people either who didn't do the work or people who were ungrateful. And so then, of course, then you look at yourself, okay, what happens to me when I invest in, and I've done my homework, I know this works. So what happens to me when I invest in a really powerful self-development product, right? Which is
Mhm.
essentially what I sell is self-development product, inner growth and healing. And well, if I pay $50 for it, it's gonna sit there on the shelf. I might check it out in like 6 months, just kind of scroll through. If I pay, I don't know, $300, I'll look at it this weekend. I'll definitely check it out. I may not do the assignment. All right, but if I pay $800, I'm definitely
Mm.
doing it. So you are actually doing clients a disservice by charging them too little, and you don't want to be ridiculous charging insane amounts. You want to make sure that your clients can afford it. Here's my rule. I want to make sure
Yeah.
that my clients can afford it, but it feels like an investment. It makes them feel a little uncomfortable, like stretches them a bit. So that's the sweet spot. And you can test it out. You can charge X amount, if that flies off the shelf too quickly, you raise it, until you find that nice spot, that equilibrium of supply and demand.
Yeah. And of course, the value of what you're providing as well needs to be greater than the cost that you're charging. And that value can be very subjective as well. Really appreciate that definition. That's good.
Yeah, but you really do want to be in the world of e-commerce. You really do want to be that person who is providing an immense amount of value and providing that 180-degree solution for your client, because your business will fail. It's just, you've got to, there are principles of integrity, there are principles that you must follow in order to have a flourishing company. And I think that's basically just the golden rule, I would think. That's as a core principle.
Yeah. And I think that's the core of any heart-led business, almost to a fault sometimes, is that you want to give, make sure it's super valuable to people, and then make sure you're charging appropriately so that, one, they actually do the work and achieve the goal that you want them to achieve, but also you're benefiting financially from it and not, living under the bridge down by the river.
Or like Fred says, so Fred Dotson, this guy I mentioned, he says, why is the most expensive thing the atomic bomb on this earth? Why is that the most expensive thing? Right? Shouldn't the most expensive thing be the products and services of someone raising the vibrational consciousness of planet Earth? People creating positive change should be well rewarded, and they are, if you can heal those blocks.
Absolutely. So what's one piece of advice that you could give to somebody that might be struggling in their heart-led business, struggling financially in their heart-led business, that will get them to kind of elevate themselves?
Dipping into my heart, great field of intelligence. I would say, develop deep faith in that greater power, that greater intelligence, that greater love, that divine presence that's within you and all around you. Because when in each moment that I wanted to give up, I had to reach very deep and go into a meditative state. And it's that silent present moment where you find that greater intelligence, that greater energy to keep going.
Cool. Well, that's a really different take than usually most people say. It's like drive through the pain or just buckle down and do it, versus, and I like this much better, is just slow it down and find that energy that comes from just being more thoughtful about what's going on. I like that. That's cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Kathleen, how can people learn more about the work that you're doing and potentially work with you?
Yeah, so we did just recently launch an app with some free
Cool.
courses there. But really go to the YouTube channel, Presensing, Presensing. Go to the YouTube channel. There's tons of tools. You'll see me sitting there, doing all these wonderful meditative practices, and just enjoy and learn, experience the method. And then from there, you can go into the app and do the free courses. And then we've got paid courses. And so, yeah, just dive in that way.
Oh, that's awesome. We'll link all that up into the show notes as well. So we'll make sure that we link that YouTube channel as well as the link to the app as well. That sounds pretty amazing. Thank you, Kathleen, so much for coming onto the show. I really appreciate you spending the time with us and sharing your insights and your journey as a heart-led business owner. Thank you.
Well, it was a lot of fun.
Of course, we don't do what's not fun, right? That's great. And to our show listeners, thank you for listening and watching the show today. We really do appreciate it. Make sure you are checking out everything that Kathleen is doing, and we are going to put that all into the show notes. So make sure you're checking that out. And also, if you could do what other smart and considerate listeners are doing, and that's giving us a rating and review on your favorite podcast application, whether that be Spotify, Apple, or on YouTube. And I would appreciate that. And I know Kathleen would appreciate it as well. So thank you again for listening. And until next time, lead with your heart.
You've been listening to the Heart-Led Business Show, hosted by Tom Jacobs. Join us next time for another inspiring journey into the heart of business.